Okay, here we are with the reflections of economic globalization, ancient and modern. This video slide will probably assist you in your critical writing 9. Just want to let you know. And I have the visuals for this chapter at the end. Okay, the interactions or interconnections of the modern era have their roots in much earlier patterns. But the pre-modern networks had important differences. And most people still produce for their own consumption, as opposed to the mass consumption in the modern world. A much smaller range of goods was exchanged, as opposed to primarily the luxury goods of the ancient world. Far fewer wage workers. Trade was in, like I said, the luxury goods. Circuits of commerce were more limited. There was no single center of trade. The units were much more equivalent. And the world of the third wave civilizations was more balanced and more multi-centered than that of the modern era. The relationships among the major civilizations were more equal, essentially. And perhaps the 21st century might be returning to that pattern. It's something that you should reflect on and based on what you've learned and think about. Because of the transportation costs, the relatively light luxury goods were the ones that dominated the ancient economic networks. In the industrialized modern world, humans could ship commodities for mass consumption, like we talked about, as opposed to just the luxury goods. And the ancient world had a relatively balanced system. Like I said, there was no dominant center of trade. And in the modern era, Western Europe really came to dominate the global system. All right, let's look at the visual sources for Chapter 7. And this is an interesting visual source. The Silk Road merchants encounter bandits. What message did this painting seek to convey? Was it traveling on the Silk Roads was potentially a dangerous undertaking? Or is it possible that it's showing the devotion to the Bodhisattva Guanyin offers protection to those travels? Or both? What else might you learn about the Silk Roads from this image? Merchants traveled in groups, maybe and used pack animals to carry their products. Horses, donkeys. You might gain knowledge of the products carried through close examination of what's in their packs and how the merchants dressed for these long trips. And the bandits in the scene offer insight into the type of weapons they might have used. But what might have been the possible outcomes to the story that this scene describes? There are a number of possible outcomes to the scenario. That Bodhisattva Guanyin might intercede on behalf of the merchants, saving them. The merchants might be rescued by other merchants. Or the bandits might demand an extortionate payment, rob the merchants of their goods, or even murder them. Just some things to think about. Okay, visual source 2. This is a stop at a caravanserai. I think I'm saying that right. So let's look at some of the specific activities that you can identify in this painting. From left to right, along the top of the painting, we see merchants settling in a walled compound with shelters. A camel hooked up to a cart. 2 men standing at a table engaged in conversation, maybe conducting business. Another man is watering his animals at a watering trough. Further to the right, 2 men are eating. And from the left to right along the bottom of the painting, 3 men seem to be giving spiritual or maybe medical aid to an injured man under a blanket. Two men are riding horses behind a pair of pack horses, crossing a stone bridge. And further to the right, two men on foot are leading what looks like a camel and a pair of horses as they approach the stone bridge. If you were wondering, I did go top to left to right, top to bottom, since we read in that order. Which of these activities might be thought, excuse me, I can't talk. Which of these activities might be thought capable of generating religious merit? And you want to think, for example, the several figures at the bottom left of the image. You know, thinking about the provision of shelter and food for both animals and people could generate religious merit. The building of infrastructure, including the walled compound in the top left, and the stone bridge at the bottom. Perhaps most important in terms of religious merit is the provision of spiritual and medical aid to that sick or injured person in the bottom left of the image. What might merchants in particular find Buddhism in an appealing faith? Well, the protection that was offered by Bodhisattva Guanyin along the Silk Roads, the support infrastructure, including the shelter and medical care, right? The possibility to earn spiritual merit to compensate for the day-to-day worldly affairs, maybe because of their profession. They took part on a daily basis. Some things to think about. Okay, section 3. Oh, I think this one is interesting. A Buddhist monk on the Silk Road. So what function does the small Buddha sitting on a cloud at the upper left play in this painting? The small Buddha represents the promise of the Buddhist message, maybe, and the oversight and perhaps protection of the Buddha offered monks who were spreading his ideas. It also represents the teachings that the monk is carrying on his back. The aura of sanctity that surrounds the monk. The reminder that the Buddha's homeland lay to the west, even. The relics in the container at the end of the monk's staff are those of the Buddha. And you see on his back, the monk's carrying a heavy load of Buddhist texts or sutras. And so why do you think the Buddhist monks were so eager to acquire and disseminate such texts? Well, the texts are the teachings of the Buddha and other great Buddhist thinkers and provide a critical guidance in the quest for salvation. Right? They support the monk's teachings and are symbols of his learning. The texts or spreading of the texts through the Buddha's teachings were disseminated were key to the successful conversion of individuals and the growth of Buddhist communities. So it's a pretty interesting painting and what it represents. Okay, oh, this one's great. Greek culture, Buddhism, and the Kushans. So why do you think the Kushan artist who created this pendant chose to weave together so many different and distinct cultural strands? I think that's a great question for this particular visual source. All of these cultural strands were present and readily accessible in this region, in the Kushan region. Greek artistic traditions are well suited, retelling the story of who this individual is on this visual source, Hariti. And there was a market for such works in this particular style. So what does the story of Hariti's transformation tell us about the impact of Buddhism in the region? Well, Buddhism had spread into the region and had interacted with and altered Hindu traditions. The Buddhist symbols and ideas that had become integrated with the Kushan art depicting Hariti's transformation. That's possible. But it's fantastic because we see all of the different influences, especially right here in the middle, are found in one visual source. Why might the Greek goddess Tyche have been used as a model for Hariti? Well, the depictions of her, another goddess, were easily adaptable, right? They could have taken her and just kind of changed it a little bit. She was a protector of some Greek cities, and that made a connection to Hariti, the protector of children, and that kind of seems like a natural connection. But Tyche was also a goddess of fortune, so her iconography, or icon, like the cornucopia, could have been easily modified to represent Hariti. It's probably a good idea to do some research about both of these individuals, kind of get a good idea so you understand this visual source. Okay, Islam, shamanism, and the Turks. Oh, this is a great image. What image of these dervishes was the artist trying to convey? Just so you know what I'm saying here. Oh, I don't know how to make this small. There you go. Now, it's possible I might have mispronounced it. But, what image of these dervishes was the artist trying to convey? The artist might have been trying to convey an image of holy men as represented through their dress and their active participation in this dance. And the two figures in white with their arms bent rather than fully extended might depict them as entering in an ecstatic state or closer contact with the divine. That's possible. The musicians in the background and these dervishes in the foreground convey maybe a sense of the sound and motion associated with the rituals. So why might such holy men have been effective carriers of Islam in Central Asia? Well, their religious practices blended Islamic ideas with shamanic traditions indigenous to this region, and their activities and the way in which they approached life contained the features that peoples of Central Asia could identify with as those of holy people. Now look at the musical instruments that accompany the turning dance. Right? The sticks on the left, a flute-like instrument known as I'm not sure how to say it, maybe a ney in the center. And the drums on the right. So what do you think this music and dance contributed to the religious experience? Well, it's significant, right? The music and dance set the religious experience apart from everyday experiences, right? Adding to maybe the sense of holiness when performing this ritual when that happens. And the rhythmic movement and sound contributed to its purpose, which was to distance participants from this world in order to come closer with the divine. Good possibility. And I don't know, did you guys notice the script here too? Excellent picture. You can learn so much from these visual sources in these documents. And that concludes Chapter 7, Commerce and Culture.